Hey, what's going on, everybody? Baseball is back. In this video, we are looking at the opening day picks for tomorrow. I am super excited. Baseball is one of my favorite sports just because it's one of those sports where you can look at the numbers and really dig into stuff and kind of have an edge that way. So, in these types of videos, we'll be looking at a lot of stats. We're looking at Vegas totals. We'll be looking at splits. We're looking at pitch types, looking at all those good stuff that will help us try to pick the best plays. So if you guys have been here before, appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you guys hit the like button. It really helps these videos reach more people and helps me grow, and I really appreciate that. So if you wouldn't mind doing that for me, wanted to join us for baseball this season, you can visit the website. Link is in the description. Follow me on Twitter at the DFS Process. I post some updates there. I post some more info, some tips and stuff will be posted there throughout the days. And without further ado, let's get started. So we have a 9-game slate on Draftkings. Fanduel has 11 games. So we'll look at Draftkings first. First thing I want to do is just look at the totals, look at projected lineups, just kind of look at teams that we'll try to get, teams that we want to target. So first game on the slate is the Boston Red Sox against the Baltimore Orioles. We have the Red Sox at one of the higher totals on the slate, 5.4. They're facing off against John Means, a lefty. We know few of these hitters on the Red Sox are super good against lefties. We have JD Martinez, down year last season, hopefully bounces back in a big way this year. Kike Hernandez, if he bats at the top of the order, he looks to be a great value play. You have Xander Bogaerts, he's expensive, but he also mashes lefties. Renfroe, we all know back when his days with the Padres, last year with the Rays, he's a guy that's used mainly exclusively. Last season he was exclusive for lefties. He's a guy that has monstrous power against lefties. So those are the main guys I like on the Red Sox side. The next game, I don't think I have too much interest. You have two pretty above average pitchers. You could look to some value pieces here with like Lorenzo Cain if he's only 3,200 batting second. But I don't really see myself going to any of those two teams to stack up. I would love to stack up the Cubs here. The wind in Wrigley, low temperature. We have like the Cubs. You probably want to target them against cool, but cold weather, wind blowing a lot in, and the price tags aren't really the best. Like a lot of guys above 5K, Contreras, Baez, and then you have pretty expensive Rizzo. So I think the guy that would probably go with like a one-off is like Peterson or Hayward, lefty righty matchup. But I don't think I have too much interest in the Cubs. I do like Kyle Hendricks. Looking at this Pirates lineup, Hendricks not a strikeout pitcher, but he's a guy that should be able to have success against like this weak lineup. He can get ground balls at times, and should be able to go like 6, hopefully 7 innings. Like you do have some switch hitters and some lefties here, but you do have a bunch of righties, and there's no DH in the NL this season, so he's going to get a face a pitcher, which is always nice. So I'll probably look at like Hendricks. I don't think I have interest in really any hitter except maybe a one-off in like Peterson. Next game, same thing. I think you can look to maybe like Nola as a pitcher if you wanted to pay up and be kind of different for 10-1 for him as an ace. Phillies lineup, they have a bunch. Their better hitters are lefties with Harper, Didi. They do have some righty power with Real Muto, Hoskins, and Alec Bohm. So you could look to the Phillies lineup and be a different stack here, but the weather, the wind blowing in isn't the best. Both teams have low totals, so I think I won't have too much interest in either of those offenses. Favorite stack of the day is going to be the Padres. It's one of the few games that has a very nice weather, 76 degrees, so the ball will be carrying compared to a lot of these other spots where you have a lot of temperatures in the 40s. You have one of the games, the Brewers' roof is closed, so that will help a little bit, but Padres have the best weather by far. Then you have the Coors, which we'll get to, but so far the games we looked at, definitely love the Padres stack. If we want to look at Madison Bumgarner, his stuff has really kind of fallen off recently. It was one of his worst seasons last year. He's getting up there in age. His velocity has started to decrease, and he can't really get righties out at a very good clip at all. So look at the splits for him. We definitely can look to a few Padres that look really appealing. Last season, he gave up a 618 slugging to righties, gave up north of a 280 batting average. We look at the power numbers. Gave up a 674 xFIP. That is one of the worst in the league as starting pitchers for righties. He gives up hard contact 47%. You're going to want to load up on a lot of these Padres righties. I don't think last season could have been an anomaly, but I think it's a trend of what we'll see. Maybe it won't be as bad this season, but he hasn't been very good against righties. Even back in 2019, he gave up a 456 slugging to right-handed batters with a 450 xFIP. So the decline was written in 2019. We saw it last season. We could see it get even worse this year. So Fernando Tatis, one of my favorite spend ups of the slate. Manny Machado, tremendous spend up. You have a deep Tommy Pham at only 3,100. He looks appealing. Profar, he might bat higher in the batting order. If he does, he looks appealing. But those are the guys I would focus on. And you could play Yu Darvish here, 10-4 if you wanted to pay up. Padres looking very good this season. Got a lot of pitchers as well as a very good lineup. So this Arizona lineup isn't super scary. The only thing is they do have a bunch of switch hitters and a bunch of lefties. But Yu Darvish should be able to strike a lot of these guys out. And then we have the Coors game. We have the Rockies against the Dodgers. Rockies have a low total compared to the Dodgers here, only a 4.5 total. They traded away Nolan Arenado, their best hitter. They still have Charlie Blackmon, but it's a lefty-lefty. He does have very good numbers against Kershaw. He's like over 300 batting average, a couple of bombs. I would look to some of these righties like CJ Cron, Trevor Story. Thing is that Rockies have a lot of lefties in this lineup, and that is not going to be appealing going up against Kershaw. So I would look to a couple of guys you can play like Blackmon, Story, Crone. I don't really want to touch anybody else. And you could always play the catcher if you want 2,700 for a catcher in Coors. Maybe you can run into one. And then Marquez on the other side, he's 6,800, facing off against this potent Dodgers lineup. I think I like the Padres more than the Dodgers, especially if they get a ton of ownership. Like, you got a lot of expensive guys. Mookie Betts, almost 6K. Corey Seager, 5,600. Bellinger, 58. That's going to be a very expensive stack to get to. Marquez, I definitely think you can look to some of these Dodgers, but I do like Marquez. He's one of the more talented pitchers on the Rockies pitching staff. And right now, the weather is still not the best for Coors. It's still a lot better than a lot of these ballparks, but as the weather gets a lot warmer, when we get to those 70 degrees, when the ball will really carry out of Coors. So I would look to the lefties here. Look at how Marquez's stats. He's been pretty poor to lefties. He's been bad at home too, so he can definitely stack up the Dodgers with some confidence. But I would focus on the lefties a little bit more. The xFIP is a lot better against righties. The strikeouts are a lot higher. So give me Corey Seager, Bellinger, Muncy stack, and kind of move on. And then we have the Rays against the Marlins. You can look to both pitchers in this game. You have Glasnow. It's going to be one of my favorites to target, 8,800 bucks. Really good matchup against this righty-heavy Miami team. Glasnow is a great strikeout pitcher. You look at his stats. You had a very good season last year for the Rays. Looking to build off of that this year. He had basically held both sides of the plate to 200 batting average. The strikeouts were there for both sides, 38 and 30, or 39 and 38%. xFIP is low for both sides. He's been even better against lefties last year. But he's just a really good strikeout pitcher. If we look at his career numbers, he's been pretty much the same in terms of batting average. He's given up a little bit more power to righties, but nothing crazy. And the strikeouts are there for both sides. He strikes out righties a little bit more over the course of his career. So I really like Glasnow. Looking at a lot of these righties on this lineup, they strike out a bunch. Aguilar, Jose Alfaro. If you want to look at like strikeouts and stuff like that, you can look up RotoGrinders Plate IQ. They make it pretty easy to kind of navigate, and this is definitely one part of my research process for the MLB season and what I'll be utilizing day in and day out. If you want to look at this game specifically, we can look to this Miami side, and Glasnow looks to be one of the best pitchers on the slate. Look at the strikeout rates. You got some big ones for Alfaro. As I mentioned, Anderson strikes out a bunch. Duvall strikes out a bunch. Aguilar a decent amount. Marte a decent amount. So I really like Glasnow. He's going to be one of my favorites to target. You could even look to Alcantara on the other side. He's only 65. If you wanted to go to him in this big ballpark, it's really pitcher friendly. He's a young pitcher that's going to get better as the years go on. And then the final game is Kansas City against the Texas Rangers. I like the Royals offense here. Gibson isn't a very good pitcher compared to these other aces that we have. Compared to all these other opening day starters, Gibson is one of the worst on the slate. If we want to look at his stats last season, he wasn't striking very many guys out. He gave up some contact. He gave up some hard hits. Last year, he was pretty bad against both sides of the plate. Lefties specifically, he had a 496 slugging. The strikeout rates are very low against lefties, only 14%, 522 xFIP. So really want to load up on some of these lefties, potentially on this Royal side. You have Merrifield leading off. He's a guy that hits both sides of the plate, so he's better against lefties, but you can play him against both righties and lefties. He's also a guy that steals a lot of bases. Mondesi, Benintendi is pretty affordable. They brought in Carlos Santana. He's a guy, switch hitter. And then Soler is only 2,800 bucks. I mean, even though Gibson is a little bit worse against lefties. See his course of his career numbers if it's been like that. Then lefties have been hit him a little bit better over the course of the season, but righties have hit him a decent amount as well. And Soler is just a guy with just an immense amount of power. For him to only be $2,800, it's a spot where I will definitely like to get to. Last season he had all of his home runs came against righties at 8 on the season, coming off of a 2019 where he launched well over 40. He had a 223 ISO. He strikes out a bunch, 35%. But going up against Gibson was not much of a strikeout pitcher. At this point of his career, I like going a guy like Soler with just so much power for him. See his career numbers: 251 average against righties and a ton of pop, 224 ISO. So that's a quick rundown. Looking at the stacks here, it's Padres looking like my favorite stack. The Dodgers are in the mix. The Red Sox and then possibly getting to some Royals. Looking back at the DraftKings pricing, looking at the pitchers, you definitely can get to Yu Darvish. You definitely can get to Nola. But Nola is a tough matchup. He's more of a tournament option. Darvish, you can play him in both cash and GPP. I don't want to play Kershaw in cores, even though this Rockies lineup isn't the best for facing lefties because they have a bunch of lefty hitters. I don't mind getting the Castillo, but Tyler Glasnow is going to be the cream of the crop. This is such a good spot going up against Miami. It's a great ballpark to pitch in, a pretty righty-heavy offense, and he strikes out righties at a very high clip. Strikes out both sides of the plate at a high clip, but righties especially. And I just think he's going to be able to dominate against the Marlins offense. I like Castillo. Castillo, Flaherty are in the mix here. I'll probably go Castillo over Flaherty just because you do have a lot of righties in this Cardinals lineup. A few switch hitters, a few lefties, but an absolute monstrous amount of righties. And Castillo, looking at his numbers against righties, he is really good against right-handed hitters. His splits. Looking at his splits last season, he had held them to just a 290 slugging, a 221 average, and he struck out righties at a 34.5% clip. So I really like Castillo at $9,200. We can look to Kyle Hendricks at 77. It's a really good spot for him. He's not a strikeout pitcher compared to some of the other guys, but this Pirates offense is really poor. He should be able to kind of cruise, I think. So going a guy like Hendricks is a guy that I will probably think you can easily get to him. And then you have a couple of cheap plays, but they're more only like tournament options. Like Alcantara is a guy you could play in cash if you wanted to. He's 65. He's my favorite in the cheap range. And maybe you can look to Brad Keller, who's only 5,900, but he's another strike. Now, he's not another guy that's not going to get it done with the strikeouts. Hopefully, he kind of gets it done by limiting damage. So I like Glasnow, and then I'll probably go Luis Castillo. Just looking at these numbers for him against righties last year, 34.5% strikeout rate. Looking at this lineup for the Cardinals, they have a bunch of right-handed bats in there. They strike out at a pretty high clip. You have big strikeout numbers for Williams. Haven't heard his name yet, but he might have been a prospect for them. You have him striking out a high clip. You have Paul DeJong, O'Neill, Goldie strikes out some. Arenado doesn't strike out very much, but he's a lot better against lefties than righties, so you have that working for him. And then he also gets to face off against a pitcher, so it's a really good spot for Castillo. At the catcher options, if you wanted to pay all the way up, you can look to Salvador Perez, 5,200. He's one of my favorite spend-up options. I like him. And then I would go Real Muto, and then I'd go Contreras if I had to rank the top three. Catcher's always a position where you can spend down a bit. You can spend down looking at some of the stacks. I like to get my catchers. If I was going to go cheap, I like to go with the teams I want to stack up, like the Padres. They have a cheap catcher because Austin Nola's on the DL, so you have Victor Carantini, the former Cub, 2,600. He can hit a little bit. You potentially can look to the Rockies and look at their cheap catcher, Diaz, at only 2,700. Anytime you get a cheap catcher in cores is always a bit appealing. And then the other stack we can look to is the Red Sox stack, and they have Plawecki. He's already kind of priced up, so he's probably looked to like one of the cheaper catchers. If I was going to go cheap here for like the Padres catcher. First base, I feel like I won't get to Freeman against Nola. I like Muncy against Marquez, lefty righty matchup in cores, a guy that matches right-handed pitching. Looking at some of the cheaper plays here, you have Rizzo, but the weather in that game blowing in, cold temperature, I don't think the ball will carry too much, so we'll look to go a little bit better. Hunter Dozier at $4,100, he looks appealing. but I'd probably go with Carlos Santana over him. You have CJ Cron, lefty. He matches lefty. He's going up against Kershaw in course at only 3,800. He's a guy that you can plug into your lineup. Carlos Santana at only 6,800. He looked appealing. And then you have some like cheap plays, like I mentioned, with uh, potentially Santana 3,600. If he bats cleanup, he would look nice. And then you have Jurickson Profar at only 3,200 bucks. Those are the main guys I'm kind of considering, and then position is kind of dead. At second base, we have Ozzie Albies, 5K for Albies. He is really expensive going up against Aaron Nola. I don't want to go to him. I will probably spend down at this position when you have some nice price tags on guys like you have 3,000 for Kike Hernandez batting leadoff, protected to bat leadoff against a lefty and John Means. Kike is a great lefty hitter. He was one of my favorites to target. We have Nick Solak at 2,900 bucks. He's also looking appealing if he bats cleanup for the Rangers at only 2,900. So those are the two that I'm kind of considering as of now. And then you have a cheap playing like Jorge Polanco is pretty affordable at only 3,300. Third base, we have a lot of studs. This is probably a position where you can spend up because you have Machado, Devers, Arenado, Chris Bryant. You have a lot of studs that can go off here. Out of all these guys, I'm going to go with Manny Machado. He's 5,700 bucks. He's a guy that absolutely mashes left-handed pitching. He's a guy that does pretty well against Bumgarner in the past. He has so much power against on both sides of the plate, but especially against lefties recently. Looking at the splits for Manny Machado, last season he batted 289 with 5 bombs and just 64 at-bats against lefties, so that was good enough for him to get a 250 ISO. He struck out only 15% of the time, which is good to see. 2019, he went absolutely bonkers against lefties. 315 average, 13 bombs, and just 127 at-bats. That was good for a 370 ISO. So sign me up for some Manny Machado at third base. Second guy I would probably consider is going cheap because I think Devers, I don't want to play him lefty-lefty matchup. Arenado, I don't want to play him. I don't really want to go to Bryant at 5K. Machado's definitely my favorite. If I was going to pay down, it would be for like Hunter Dozier at 4,100 bucks. He might bat 7, so that wouldn't be the best if he's batting at the bottom, but he does have some power, and the Royals do have one of the better stacks of the day. And then if you can go to Alec Boehm at only 3,100, he's a guy that will be good, will be doing some big things for the Phillies in the years to come. Really talented young player against a lefty. Fried is a very good pitcher, but he can give up some bombs to righties, and Boehm is a guy that would probably be able to tag him. Shortstop, another position where you can spend up a bit, and you have Tatis sticking out at 5,700 for him. He's going to be one of the guys I plug in here. I love him a lot. Looking at the stats for him, he also is a guy that can hit lefties really well. Last season, he batted a very nice, only batted 242 against lefties, but he had 3 bombs, 7 in 62 at-bats. Pretty small sample size. Back to 2019, he batted 419, so looking at his career numbers against lefties, 331 average, 8 home runs. Gives him a 266 ISO. He's a guy that is super aggressive on the base path, will steal bases, hits really well, and just has so much power. So he's such a fun player to watch. He's a guy that I feel good about. You have Corey Seager looking nice right below him. You have Trevor Story against the lefty. He mashes lefties as well. You have Bogarts. You have a lot of appealing options here, but Tatis is going to be my favorite. Looking at some cheaper options that look appealing is in the 3K range. You potentially can look to like a Jorge Polanco at only 3,300 if you wanted to get some savings here. But a lot of these top-end guys are priced up, so I will probably like to get to some of these expensive guys at shortstop and third base. Moving on to the outfields, we have at the top end, it's a bunch of studs, as you would expect. I would go Bellinger at 58 is one of my favorites to target if you wanted to pay all the way up. You have Randy Rosarena, 5,300 after his unbelievably hot postseason. If he can continue that, that would be nice. You have a lot of guys that are priced cheaper than you would expect. You have JD Martinez going up against a lefty at only 4,300 bucks. He's a guy that I want to get to. Down year for JD Martinez last season, but I'm expecting him to kind of bounce back. A lot of guys struggled last season. A lot of some hitters, they just shortened season. They probably didn't get as much practice time in the cages and all that stuff. So hopefully he kind of comes back to form because he's a guy that, looking at last year's numbers, is obviously disappointing. But looking back at 2019, He is one of the baseball's best left-handed hitters. 404 average against lefties back in 2019. 2018, he batted 336. 2017, he batted 376. Career-wise, over 300 average. Ton of power against lefties for him. 286 ISO to be exact. So 43 is just too cheap for him. The weather looked like it could rain out here, but the weather's looked a little bit better recently. So hopefully, yeah, the weather stays good for this Boston game because it's a pretty good park to hit in. And JD Martinez just too cheap. He shouldn't be cheaper than like Almonte, Ian Happ, some of these guys that are expensive, more expensive than him. Nelson Cruz looks appealing, $4,200 just because he has so much power. Then Attendee, he had a really bad year for the Red Sox. Maybe just need to change the scenery. He's 4K. He looks like a value play that we can look to. And then 3K range is loaded. You have a really good price tags on Austin Meadows. Joey Gallo is only 3,600 against Brad Keller guy. That doesn't strike guys out. And Gallo, if he's not striking out, he's probably going to hit it a long way. So you got to have some interest in Joey Gallo. You have Jock Peterson as a one-off play that we can look to. And then I like Renfroe if you wanted to stack up the Red Sox. He hits lefties really well. I like going down to Kike Hernandez if you wanted to go to him at 3K. Tommy Pham is only 3,100. But one of the value plays that I really like here in the outfield is Jorge Soler checking in at only 2,800. That price tag is just too cheap. We have the Royals have one of the better totals on the slate. He should not be $2,800 going up against a pitcher that doesn't strike very many guys out. So he's another guy that, just like Gallo, if he's not going to strike out, he's probably going to hit it a long way and put the ball in play deep. So I really like him at that price tag. And that's basically it for the breakdown. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. I might have like a new series out tomorrow where I kind of do a short form video. So if I happen to get that out, make sure you watch that. But let's go ahead and look at what FanDuel is looking at for opening day. Okay, FanDuel, they have 11 games for opening day. They've included the two 1 o'clock games, so we have a couple of more options to target. The pitching on FanDuel is always one of the most important because you only get one pitcher unlike two on Draftkings, so you need your pitcher to kind of at least have a good game. Bieber is 11.5, Garrett Cole, Darvish, Glasnow. I like the price tag on Glasnow at 10K. I'd probably go Bieber, Glasnow, then Garrett Cole, then Darvish if I had to rank them. In the 9K range, you do have Aaron Nola at a good price tag at 9,200. He looks somewhat appealing, even though the matchup is scary. Hendricks is all the way up to 91, so he's not a guy I'm going to be looking at. I do like Castillo at only $8,900. He's cheaper than some guys I wouldn't expect him to be cheaper than. He has so much strikeout upside, and this St. Louis lineup is potent, but they do have a lot of righties, and Castillo was almost unhittable against righties last year. And then you have like Alcantara's 85. He's not a guy I'm looking at. You have Fried, Evaldi, guys I'm not really looking at. So the cheapest I'd probably consider is maybe you can look to. If you want it to be really tricky, you can play Marquez at $6,900, just because he can have good games every once in a while, and everybody will be on the Dodgers lineup. So if he has a good game, you're going to get a huge leverage on the field if you play him. But I will probably take the safe approach and go with a guy like Castillo, who gives you a lot of strikeout upside at a pretty favorable price tag on FanDuel. And then looking at catcher first base, basically the same guys I kind of mentioned. I like if you wanted to look at Fantasy Labs and look at their lineup tool, you can kind of sort a little bit easier. But if you wanted to pay up, it's Salvador Perez, 3,600 looks appealing. You have Real Muto at only 3,200, so I would probably save some money and go that route. You have Rizzo at 3,300, Contreras. You have maybe Carlos Santana at 2,800, another guy that you can look to. And then if you wanted to go with some punt plays at this catcher first base position, you can look to like Christian Vasquez if he plays and kind of bats near the top of the lineup. He's a guy that does hit lefties pretty well. And I don't know if Profar is. He might be outfield. Second base outfield is 2,300. Second base, it's Jose Ramirez. You have him at second base. He's 4,100. He looks good, but I will probably have to go cheap at this position. I like Mondesi at only 3,200. A switch hitter. It gives you a lot of stolen base upside. He's had a pretty good spring training, so hopefully he can kind of carry that into the regular season. He batted over 300 after a pretty up and down season last year, but he did end the season at a very high note. So I'm expecting good things out of Mondesi. For him to be only 3,200 is a price tag that I will like to get to. Then you have some other guys that you can look to, like a Torres at 3,100. We have, I believe, Kike Hernandez. He's second base eligible. He's 2,700, so he's also appealing, especially if he bats leadoff. So second base, probably a position that I go cheap in because I still want to get to some of my studs here with Manny Machado at third base, 4K. Just amazing numbers for him against lefties, expecting that to continue. If you wanted to save money, you can look to Chris Bryant at 3,300. Maybe look to Alec Bohm. Maybe look to Hunter Dozier. I want to spend up for third base. And I probably want to spend up for shortstop, looking at all these studs at the position. Yeah, Fernando Tatis, 4,300. Expect him and Machado to probably be one of the favorites, like 1-2 man stacks to target all season, especially when they're going up against a bad lefty. And you can always go cheap if you wanted to with like a Baez at 3,100, a Torres at 3,100. But I want to go to some of the firepower and get to some of these Padres hitters. So we still have 2,900, so we can save some money in the outfield. We have a lot of the guys I mentioned that I do like. You have uh, Giancarlo Stanton at 3,800. He wasn't on the Draftkings slate, but he looks very appealing on Fanduel. We know he is one of the best lefty mashers. We have JD Martinez, 35. We have uh, Tommy Pham is 31, I believe. It's only 3K, so he's also in play if you wanted to stack up the Padres. Will Myers is a lot more expensive. Actually, Will Myers is only 29. He's a lot more expensive on DraftKings, so I'll probably go Will Myers over Pham on FanDuel. But then I'd probably try to save some money and go with a Kike Hernandez, 2,700, especially if he bats leadoff. We know he hits lefties really well. Does have some hard hits and hard contact against lefties. And then looking at I believe Jorge Soler he's 3K on FanDuel. He looks better on DraftKings, but he's definitely in play. I might just try to jam in JD Martinez on both sides. He's still appealing on FanDuel at 3,500. Still leaves you with 2,800 left to fill out the last couple spots. But that's basically it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. Best of luck, and catch you all later.